Hi, welcome Loomers. This is Will from Art by WillScott. In this section, I'm going to actually teach you a little bit about how I am able to um, protect some of my loom stuff. And to go over this, let me demonstrate you something that I made over a year ago. This is actually about, I want to say maybe a year and a half almost. This is Mewtwo. And when I originally made Mewtwo, I used bands other than Rainbow Loom bands. Now, honestly, I didn't know anything about oils, what was used back then in order to be able to keep it together. Because obviously, your best option to use would be, of course, silicone oil, especially made for rubber, vinyl, leather, anything like that, to be able to help to maintain, and moisturize your bands. Now, let me show you what has happened throughout the years. So, I used something different in order to be able to help protect my stuff, and I didn't know how it was going to affect it, but it's already been quite a long time, and it's actually kept it in pretty good condition. A lot of my other projects that I've done that are over a year old have also kept up their shape, and I have not had any broken bands whatsoever. Now, Mewtwo is made completely out of different bands that are not Rainbow Loom. They're out of other brands, and let me show you what happened. First of all, let's look at the one for his skin, the pale pink. Um, they look like they're in pretty good shape still. You can actually see that the bands are still pretty good condition. Looks like they have their stretch in there. Alright. Now, as you can see on the eyes, you can see that some of them are kind of cracking. Now, the ones that are obviously cracking are the purple ones. So you can see from the tail, there's a lot of cracking involved. This is what happens with other bands that are not from Rainbow Loom brand, because they don't have the same type of resistance or coating. Right? They're just not made the same way. But mine has kept up its shape, actually, because I coated it with varnish. Now, I used originally varnish because the thing about varnish is that it actually helps to coat onto what you're putting it on. We usually use it for paintings or for wood. When you're putting varnish on top of something, it's only going to coat the top. It's not going to affect the bottom, and it's also washable off. So you can be able to easily take it out afterwards, which I thought was would be pretty safe to be able to use on my bands, because if it started to affect it in any way, I can go ahead and just rinse it right out and try something else. Now, nothing happened, and so I thought it was a pretty good seal anyway. So it kind of helped protect it for a while, but eventually you're gonna have to continue doing different coats because of it. So the reason why I used varnish is because most of my stuff were put in display. I wasn't really playing along with them much. They were used to be put into display so that way people can be able to see them and do whatever they want, take pictures and such. So they were in somewhat of a lot of lighting, but not much. They were kept in a cool place most of the time, but none of the bands have broken. But you can see that even with the seal, a lot of the bands have kind of gotten gray over time, and they've gotten so many cracks, but they haven't snapped. Not one band has snapped. They just kind of discolor over the age. But I actually did use with Rainbow Loom bands. This is my Lugia. My Lugia has, you can see, is pretty large, and you can actually see how it looks like on the Rainbow Loom page or on my page. Right? Rainbow Loom actually made it as part of its weekly Loom Stars, and the entire thing is made out of fishtail. Right? So of course it's a pretty easy pattern to be able to work with already, but you can see that I have not washed off the varnish, so you can kind of see that it's crackling, it's shiny. I used also a gloss varnish. All right, so you can see obviously that it's still there. So what I can do is I can take it out, right, and I can be able to put in another layer of something else. All right, but you can see that everything is still in really good condition. All right, there's no crackling whatsoever, which is awesome from Rainbow Loom brand bands. All right, not a single band has snapped throughout my entire design. Now let's go over some information about varnishes and sealers. So I'm actually going to tell you differences between varnish and a sealer. First, like I said, I used a varnish. I used actually a gloss varnish. You can go from gloss, depending if you want a shiny, or you can choose a matte or opaque version. Matte or opaque do not give you a shiny look to it. It's just going to be flat, right? So, like I said, gloss is polyurethane, right? As opposed to a sealer, I got this multi-purpose sealer. It's from the Americana brand. Both of them, you can get them at your local art stores. All right. The difference between a sealer and using silicone oil, and I would recommend using a sealer other than anything else if you want to. The only reason you would want to use varnish is if you want to put it on top of your silicone oil. If you're using any oils to be able to protect your stuff, but you have them on display or they constantly see sunlight, go ahead and use something to put it on top. Varnish works very well. Like I said, it can easily be taken out with water as well, as opposed to sealer. Now, sealer is not just going to coat your top. It's going to actually kind of penetrate a little bit into the actual objects, and it's going to help protect a little bit more than just the varnish. So it's not going to be coming off or as easily, all right, if at all. But the sealer is actually going to be a bit more of a protection. It's not going to damage or affect your bands unless, of course, they're a different brand. If you do not put any protection onto your stuff and they are outside, this is what will eventually happen. Your Rainbow Loom bands tend to overstretch, they heat up, they discolor, they just look really, really bad. All right, so especially the jelly bands, they tend to heat up a lot faster than the opaque ones. The opaque ones will just go ahead and discolor. So you can kind of see how discoloring can happen with the sunlight. But the jelly ones will kind of start to melt. All right, and this is what happens when there's no protection on them. And this is, by the way, over a span of a year. Okay, so in terms of being able to seal your product first, the oil, you want to be able to use something like a 303. Product actually is one of the best out there that I know of. It's actually water-based, so it's not going to be drying up your rubber like a lot of the other silicone ones. So if you use some other type of silicone oil like Armor All or any of the other type of high brands that have silicone on it, those are going to be drying out your rubber bands after some time, so you can kind of have to continually keep doing it. So before I put in my sealer, I use the 303 aerospace protectant, and what it does is, like it says right here, it keeps vinyl, rubber, and plastic looking newer longer. So this is actually going to be put on first as your first layer, and then you put on your sealer. So what it does is it's going to help prevent fading, cracking, repels dust, lint, and staining, and it's dry to the touch, so it's not a greasy finish. You want to go ahead and do this in a ventilated area, so preferably outside, right? What you're going to do is you're just going to spray a few coats onto it. You're going to be using a towel to be able to dry off and rub off any excess. So that's pretty much what you're going to do. Unless you can also be able to spray onto the towel itself and just go ahead and apply it all over onto your stuff. One thing, like this, like all the other stuff that I've been using, I would recommend only if you're doing it for your creatures, not for bracelets, right? Because you're going to be wearing this. A lot of times with some of this stuff, it's meant for cars and other parts that you're not going to be putting onto your body. So make sure that you read the warning label also. If you're a minor, make sure that you have a parent or an adult be able to help you out applying this, because you do not want to have this be sprayed onto your eye or be able to consume it in any form or shape. Okay, so make sure that you apply it all over when you put it on, and once you have placed it all over and it's been dried, then you can go on to the sealing process. Okay. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is teach you about how to be able to apply sealer on. Another thing that I do not recommend is using a gel, like a sealing gel or gesso. Leave those more for the painting stuff, okay? Also because they do not have the type of protection that you're going to need for your bands. One thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is use a sealer on my little Mew. You can find this little dude on my Pokemon playlist. It's also going to be available right here on the little eye. You can be able to check it out. So in order to be able to apply your stuff, you're going to need a brush with clean bristles. Make sure that they are completely clean. If you have to go buy a brush, go ahead and do that. All right. Do not use this brush on anything except sealing. If you use it on painting, you might have little paint stuff stuck on it, or oils, or anything else. You do not want to mix it with your sealer. The reason for that is because it can get stuck in there once it's sealed, and there's no way to be able to take it out unless you go ahead and just use a toothpick really quickly, or another brush, another dry brush, or a towel, or wash it all off with water before it dries up, right? So let's go ahead and start off with all of your stuff with a clean brush. Make sure you use a really nice brush that can have really nice hair on it. For my sealer, I'm just going to, or actually first you want to go ahead and make sure that you shake it. So make sure it's well shaken. I have some on my cap right there, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab a little bit from there. You can see that I have some there already. And I'm going to apply everything first, one coat right on the top. When it dries, we're going to turn it over, right? And then we're going to apply it on the back. And if you need to do another coat, then go ahead and do so. But initially, don't grab too much. You can see that I have just a bit. So I'm going to go lightly first to make sure I don't put in too much. It's going to look very gloppy. Try not to get it on your hands either. If you need to use gloves, go ahead and do so. But try to grab as much of the surface area as you can. Wherever you see glops, right, use your bristles to kind of poke along so it'll go inside the little niches and cracks that you have in the bands. So you want to go ahead and try to get the outer surface. Right. If you see that there isn't much putting on anymore, grab some more. Do not dip the entire thing. Make sure that you still have about partial in. Right. And then the tail, there's a lot of bristles right there. So you just want to coat everything. And whatever else you need to go ahead and keep adding, do so. Do not add too much, because then it'll dry up like a big plastic thing on there, okay? If you feel like you added too much on anywhere, then you can use part of a towel and kind of dab in, so that way it picks up a bit of where you put it on, okay? So make sure you brush as much of the surface area as you can on one side. Wait until it dries, and then you're going to flip it over. Right? So that's my take on using sealers. Right? I'm also going to give you some information in terms of oils, but like I said, your best bet would be to use oils, especially one made for vinyl, for rubber, and leather. And I can go ahead and go over like one of my good brands also. A lot of them can be used mostly for making the texture a lot more easier to use. But in this case, like I said, initially I used varnish when I initially started. So I started to use a multi-purpose sealer, right? And as you can see, right, it improves a lot of the adhesion. A lot of it is mostly used for wood and painting, but I saw that it protects the bands very well. When you do this, you want to make sure that you are doing it only if you're not going to be wearing the stuff. I'm doing it on my creatures because I'm not wearing them, right? This is a way that I have found that it's most appropriate for me to be able to keep my stuff intact for a lot longer, and so that way the sun doesn't change their color. They don't get affected by the weather. It all depends also on where you live as well. I'm gonna be adding some sealer onto my Mewtwo as well, and this is the way that I am able to go ahead and keep them appropriately. Make sure you always have a clean brush. Wash this as well with water. You can also be able to use conditioner to be able to keep it soft and clean. But always clean your brushes, okay? Especially when you're sealing something. You do not want to mix your brush with any other thing. You will only want to have a sealer brush just for sealing, okay? And if you want to go ahead and apply it also with any silicone oils, you can also be able to have one as well. Those are my takes for it, and have fun with your looming.